Matt, let's start with Duke St. John's, the first of those matchups on Friday night. This will be the last time I probably get to bring it up this year. The Siena Saints had Duke on the ropes, 13-point lead in the second half, and Duke turned it around. They came back, they won that game. The following game, I guess everyone just had Duke to win in a blowout, which they eventually did. But TCU for a half, what was very, very good. And I think they did a lot of that with their ball pressure and their guards really sort of pressuring Duke. To me, that's the only chance St. John's has here is to ramp the pressure up to an 11 out of 10 and turn defense into offense, something that we talked about, sort of ahead of the Kansas game that I talked about with Kelly Stewart over the weekend on Last Call. So talk to me, Duke St. John's. Do you see St. John's with a chance here?
Oh, they definitely have a chance. Both of these teams, it's going to come down to one main thing. And for Duke, it's very, very simply, if you don't have Caleb Foster, which seems highly likely here, your only true point guard is Caden Boozer. And you are getting 40 minutes of press from St. John's. And if Caden Boozer's alone dealing with St. John's press, which Kansas couldn't do as a group, then Duke is in big trouble because their secondary ball handler is Cameron Boozer. And Cameron Boozer is so important to their offense and scoring the basketball. You cannot have him bringing the ball up first of all, he's not a true point guard. And second of all, it's going to exhaust him. He's going to be exhausted. Who is the secondary ball handler bringing the ball up on the press for Duke? I don't have an answer. All of their other guards are not ball handling guards. Isaiah Evans, Dame Sard, Nick Kamenya all have an under 10% assist rate. They are not there to handle the basketball at all. And Caden Boozer's been fine, but he is not the guy you want for 40 minutes handling St. John's pressure. That said, you can only set up that pressure if you score the ball. And St. John's is going to have issues putting the ball in the basket. Duke is going to do exactly what Kansas did defensively. They're going to stay at home. They're going to switch a lot. They're going to close off driving lanes, and they're going to say, we don't think you can shoot. Shoot the basketball, because Duke already allows a really high three-point rate. It's very hard to get inside against this team. And St. John's almost lost to Kansas, and Bryce Hopkins had the best three-point shooting game of his entire life, which is not going to happen again. So St. John's has to actually hit those threes with Ian Jackson, with Josan Sannon, with Dylan Darling, who all were ice cold from deep. And St. John's is not going to get as many offensive rebounds against Duke as they did against Kansas. So the question is, can Duke handle the pressure, but can St. John's make enough shots to be able to actually apply the pressure?
Yeah, no, that is, I think you sort of nailed it. So from a just trying to, sort of handicap the spread here, my number comes out Duke minus 6.01. So slightly shaded to the underdog. And assuming everyone is healthy. I think for me that what would put me on St. John's would be if I could sort of get wind of like Duke being less healthy than they're letting on. That being said, it does seem like they're sort of coming into this week in a much better situation than they were last week from a health standpoint. So I don't know if I'll, it feels like they're rolling into this game mostly healthy. Have you heard anything different, or is that kind of how you're like approaching it?
Well, they're probably not going to have Caleb Foster. I'd be very surprised if they did. And then they got Pat Gongba back, but he just looked so not healthy. And like maybe it changes in 5 days. He'll play, but it does not seem like he's going to be the Pat Gongba that he's been all year.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point because, I did read some things like, maybe Foster would give it a go. And it's like, I think if Duke, let's just assume Foster's out, and how many, I think Gongba played 13 minutes against TCU.
Minutes. Yeah.
I mean, if that ends up being the same, which I guess I was in my head, I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot of time now till Friday. But we've seen it's almost like we've seen, does every team like want to downplay their injury? It almost seems like every team wants to downplay their injuries. I mean, Billadou never steps foot on the floor for UCLA. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if that's what's happening here for Duke, I think I kind of lean towards St. John's on the number, just with the respect that, like, I do think their physicality can give Duke a hard time. And defense and just having like a good defensive game plan, but also being able to just out sort of tough them is probably how you're going to beat Duke. I mean, it was definitely, Sienna's plan was just play a certain type of defense and pray threes don't go in, which they kind of, got that ended up working for them. TCU guard pressure, which is basically what they've done all year, but Duke had a very efficient and like amazing offensive second half to blow that one open. So yeah, I kind of think St. John's can be in this if they just can clean up the glass on both ends of the floor and force turnovers. They have to force Duke. They have to turn Duke over, or they're going to get my concern for the Johnnies. Because again, this is the side I would prefer to be on here against the number, is that Duke gets them into like half court offense and they can't run half court offense. That would be my concern. But lean Johnnies against the number for me.
I mean, the thing is, like, they forced Kansas into 16 turnovers, but only 7 of those 16 turnovers were live ball turnovers. The other 9 were dead ball turnovers. And a dead ball turnover, while it's still a turnover and fantastic, it's still leading the half court offense. And I still don't think St. John's is going to get much transition offense at all. They'll get a couple of those steals in the front court and just be able to go right up with it. But Duke is as good of a transition denial as there is in the country. And so this is still going to be a half-court affair. And yeah, St. John's will pressure Duke, and St. John's will be physical against Duke. But inevitably, that only works if they can score in the half-court. And they just could not against Kansas, and Duke's an even better defense than Kansas is. So what you're saying is true, but it only matters if they can actually score the basketball. And Zuby Ejiofor is going to have to be a big part of that. Malik Brown is as good of a defender as there is in the country, but he does foul a ton. And St. John's was able to get Flory Badunga in early foul trouble. If Malik Brown's in early foul trouble and Pat Gongva's still like playing at 30%, like it seemed like he did against TCU, that's where Duke is probably in bigger trouble defensively.
Yeah, it'll pretty much the rest of the way. I think you could just about say that's about any game. Like it's going to be very interesting, and there's probably cases to be made for both sides. We're just at that point of the year where the lines are going to be tight. There's probably a case to be made for both sides. There's probably a path to victory for both teams, and so for me personally, that's kind of like one I'll be monitoring is the health of those Duke players, because I do think that gives St. John's just enough of an edge against the number to justify taking the points there. Mm. Matt and I will be back in the morning. Again, one more programming note for tomorrow. 2 shows for me for my baseball peeps. We are back. Myself, Tokyo Brandon, Brian Leonard, 9 a.m. Eastern, first total bases of the year. We'll talk Yankees, Giants, and then we are answering the rest of the time. We're just going to answer questions about futures, win totals, whatever you guys want to talk about, whatever you guys ask about. Matt and I will be back 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow to talk about the other 3 regions, break those down, and we'll give you guys a 3-teamer tomorrow. That we'll commit to it right now. We will figure out a Sweet 16 3-teamer for you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, very much appreciate it. It is also $5 Tuesday at Wager Talk. I should point that out. Check that out. Everyone's got $5 plays up for sale. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the morning.